Go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of Monroe County Solid Waste Management District Citizen Advisory Committee. This is the third Thursday of July. It's the 21st at about 5:40 p.m. Vice Chair, please call roll. If not. All right. Here.
And Arnold. And Austin.
Present.
And Edwards here. Bill Goins.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
And Paul White.
All right.
We do have a quorum today.
Thank you. So we do have quorum, and normally our first item of business, well, I guess we can go with the adoption of the agenda. This is distributed by email and uploaded to Dropbox. Is there any objections to adopting the agenda as distributed? All right, seeing none, it is adopted. And normally our first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes, but we do have Matt Wasserman here with us to speak on remind me of the name of the
Community food cycle.
All right, on community food cycle. So Matt, I want to propose, if you're ready, you can go ahead and get started with that since we're getting close to our start time anyway, and then we can pick up on our minutes after you've finished. If that works for you.
Sure. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
All good?
All right. Let me share my screen here. Let me pull up. Oh, that's the right one. Hang on. All right. All right. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for giving me a few minutes here to talk about community food cycle and kind of what we do. And obviously, I've got about 10 slides or so. I'll go through them. And then obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me while I'm going through or wait. Either way is fine. So I'm Matt Wasserman. I started a small company out here in New Jersey called Community Food Cycle. But before I got here, just so you know, my background, I'm a chemical engineer, was a corporate executive for a long time, running innovation and sustainability. I started a nonprofit out here in Princeton called Sustainable Princeton, working on kind of all things sustainable. Was chair of the Environmental Commission, and have spent like the last 6 years or so working primarily on food waste and just how do we solve that problem. And that really kind of came about because we used to be able to put our food waste curbside here in Princeton, and then it went away, and I was helping to try to figure out how could we bring it back. And so through some work with Bloomberg Philanthropies and Princeton University, eventually came to a place where I raised a little bit of money and founded a small company where we looked at how do we deal with food waste and how can we do it in a way that could actually be not only beneficial to the environment, but also maybe make some money for folks who want to do it. Because what we did find is that while compost is cool, it doesn't pay the bills to kind of turn food waste into compost. So we were trying to look for something else, and I'll kind of get into that here in a minute. So what is bokashi? I don't know. I don't know. Stop me if you know all this, but I just thought I'd give you one slide on kind of what it is. So it's an anaerobic fermentation process that originated in Japan many, many years ago. Just like if you got into the sourdough bread phenomenon during COVID, like that, it requires a mother culture. In this case, they call it EM1, which are essential microbes number 1. I like to say it's very similar to kombucha, but instead of making probiotics for your stomach, we're making them for your soil. It's very much kind of the same thing. But historically, it's been done on a very small scale. It was done where households would basically take a bucket, They would kind of put their food scraps in that, on a daily basis. They would kind of pack it down. They would sprinkle some of these microbes on top, and then, press them down again. You'd kind of lasagna it until the bucket was full. You'd wait about 2 weeks, and then you would dig a little hole in your garden and you would dump the bokashi into the hole and then put the soil back on top, and it would finish doing its thing, and you'd have some great soil. The pH of that product's about 3.5, which kills all the pathogens. If you're familiar with compost requires you to be at 131 degrees for a few days. That kills the pathogens, but pH does it as well. But the interesting thing is, while compost looks really cool, the physical characteristics of bokashi is not cool. I mean, it basically looks like food waste. It's not something that's, kind of pretty to look at. And it's kind of why it was buried in the soil. But if you think about it, kind of the challenge to that is, well, how do you scale that process up? How do you deal with tons of product instead of pounds of product? Do you just use hundreds of buckets? Is there even a market for fermented food waste? Does anyone really want to dig kind of the equivalent of, thousands of linear feet of holes or trenches to bury this stuff on a regular basis? Do we need to look at a different market? And so, as we kind of got into this, I mean, that was kind of at least the business case side of things. How does, can you actually make bokashi work at a large scale? And then there's some other things kind of along the lines of, it is anaerobic, so you do need to keep it anaerobic. You don't want it, you want to make sure that air isn't getting to it on a regular basis. Can you make the cash flow positive? And for me personally, I started this company up literally a couple months before COVID, and that caused a whole lot of other problems. So just some of the challenges we had to deal with. How did we deal with it? Well, bucket composting is possible to a point. There's a really great little company that started in LA and has come back to New England called Epic Renewal. They are doing bokashi at a bucket level. They, have basically, 8 or 9 buckets at a time. They put them on a pallet, and they deal with that. But that's still not large enough. We actually found that we could actually use 55-gallon drums. We tried going larger, but reality is it's hard to get food waste, which it doesn't have a great consistency, out of large containers. So 55-gallon drums seem to work pretty well for us, even when we were dealing with 1 or 2 tons at a time. Also found out that nobody wants large amounts of food waste to bury. And no surprise, really. We kind of figured that going in. But they were very interested in what bokashi had to offer, because bokashi, it's not a fertilizer, it's a soil amendment. And the difference there is, a fertilizer is used immediately. It's used by the plant, almost immediately. It's why you put fertilizer on every year. Whereas, what bokashi is trying to do is make the soil better, for the duration, for year after year after year. And it does that by putting the right nutrients and the right microbes in the soil, so that they can do all the right things themselves. They can pull nitrogen from the air, and maybe you don't have to use, maybe you have to use a little bit of fertilizer, but you don't have to use anywhere near the amount that we do today. That causes all kinds of other issues. But what that led us to is separating the liquids from the solids. So, the one big piece of machinery, and I say big, but it's not really big, but the one piece of machinery that we use is a screw press. And essentially, I'll show you a picture of it in a moment, but essentially what it is you can imagine, food kind of comes into a little, under the back end of it. It gets pushed through a cylinder that's got a screw in the middle of it. That screw is pushing the solids to the outside against the screen. It's pushing the liquid from that food waste through the screen, and then the solids continue on and come out the backside. And the solids can then be composted. It can be sent to an anaerobic digester. You can even use it as animal feed. But then here's where you have to make some decisions: is, do you do that process before or after you ferment the product? If you do it before the ferment, then you've got a product that you could then it's easier to compost, it's easier to send out for animal feed. Either way, it can be sent to an AD facility. If you ferment it first, you can still compost it. It just takes. The startup was a little bit longer, because you have a fight between anaerobic microbes and aerobic microbes, but it eventually works itself out. Just takes a little bit of time. And animal feed, animals really don't like pH of 3.5. They don't like vinegar. So there's kind of you kind of have to deal with that if you were planning on using this as animal feed. And then the other solution is in terms of keeping the process anaerobic. I was able to do it because I'm in 55-gallon drums. I would put big plastic liners in them and kind of tie them off and squeeze out the air. But I think long term, you really want to think about either nitrogen or CO2 blanketing, just to be something a little bit more elegant than kind of what I was, and also strategic location of spigots in the drums to kind of where you could kind of pull the liquid out from. So a couple of different things we learned there along the way. So here's a picture of food waste. I mean, it could look like anything, but there you can see kind of a zucchini and some squash and some, whatever it is kind of came in that day. And this is a picture of a screw press. This is about 5 feet long. It's about 3.5 feet tall, and about 2 feet deep. This thing does about 200 to 300 pounds an hour. I rented this, but you could also buy this. And they have much larger ones. So this, like I said, this was 200 pounds an hour for me. But the next highest up, the next larger one does about 3 to 4 times that. So depending upon what you were, how much food waste you're dealing with, kind of dictates potentially how large you want this to be. And then ultimately, what I did is I took that liquid and we bottled it. We called it Grow Pro. We diluted it, made it a foliar spray on the left, and undiluted, it's just that probiotic that we talked about. But what we've got is there's a good amount of data, some good scientific studies have been done versus fertilizer or just on its own in terms of the yield. We put a little bit of diatomaceous earth in the foliar spray, and then that although we don't call it a pesticide or proven pest control because that requires a whole lot of other kind of government work, it clearly does do that job. And some of our biggest successes have been kind of in vineyards. We have a couple of vineyards here, one guy who just loves our product and can't say enough about even kind of helping out with downy mildew and some other kind of rot that they normally would see on their grapes. So that's been great. And as I mentioned, unlike kind of a sloppy food waste, what you have here is a liquid that you can just add to an irrigation system. So you just, whatever you normally put your water, however you would normally put water on your lawn or farm or whatever, you can just add this to it. I know I've been asked, hey, can you give us a little bit about the math? And, just kind of, we were collecting from about 100 homes, a couple of restaurants, a brewery, and a market. We were getting about 1 to 2 tons of food waste per week. For every 1 ton of food waste that we were kind of dealing with, that would kind of dictate somewhere between 75 and 150 gallons of liquid, and about 700 to 1,400 pounds of solids. And the reason why it varies so much is sometimes, you'd get product that was really high in water content, grape, squash, lots of fruit and vegetables. And sometimes we'd get a whole lot of rice and bread and meat and things like that didn't. So it really does depend. And so you really have to be prepared for kind of both. At a very high level, kind of from an income perspective, you can kind of think about, we collected about a $50 tipping fee per ton. But if you were also hauling the food waste away from somebody, you could also charge a hauler fee, which was significantly higher than that. If you're doing it at on a tonnage basis, you're probably getting that same amount again. If you're doing it from residents, you're probably collecting something much higher. I mean, right now, people spend $25 to $45 a month to have someone come pick up their food waste, in a little 5-gallon bucket outside their house around the country. That's not just here. And then, you can collect somewhere between, we were finding we could sell it from like $10 to $30 a gallon for the Bokashi liquid. Again, if I'm selling a gallon, it's $30. If I'm selling a 250-gallon IBC tote, I'm selling it at $10 a gallon. And then from an expensive perspective, you're from a variables perspective, you've got labor. So depending upon, 1 to 2 tons a week was probably about 15 hours in terms of cleanup and all that kind of stuff. You've got your fixed equipment, which is $350 to $500 a week, depending upon the size. And then you've got some lab testing. You don't do it every week, but at least once or twice a month for $100 or so, you send out your product to make sure that it's got right nutrients and it's got all the pathogens killed and things like that. So if you look at the red and the green, you can kind of see that you can kind of finally get yourself to something that at least breaks even, if not makes you some money. And that's what we were trying to get to. There is some additional, sort of capital costs. If you wanted to buy the screw press, you could buy it for 30 to 60K. You can buy them much cheaper in China, but I didn't use the ones from China, so I can't vouch for how good they work. Drums, buckets, if you're going to, you need certain kind of electricity to set this up, some drum carts and pallet jacks, things like that. If you happen to have a tractor or skid steer, it's awesome because it makes life so much easier, but you don't need it. And in terms of what's next to be done, what's left to be done. Look, I've spent a couple of years working on this. We spent a lot of time also working with regular compost, so it wasn't all in bokashi. It could probably still be a bit more elegant. I know that they've been talking about maybe getting some grants. So I think in terms of there's still some R&D work that could be done in terms of making it more elegant, in terms of optimizing the long-term stability, because these are microbes. They have an end. They have an end of life. So you have to just understand how long do they live and what's the best conditions to keep them living. I mean, I know that I've had some living out to 6 months, even some living out to a year, but could they be even longer, and how do you do that? I'd also love some more tests on farm for the university. We tried really hard to work with Rutgers over here, and despite some really great conversations, we never got it jump started. And obviously just more people, to do it. I think it's a great product. It's really does wonders for the soil, but just need more people to do it. So that's me. That's some of my contact information, and I'll kind of open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate your time and your coming here. That was really interesting. I want to, ask if anybody has any questions.
What have you seen the challenges to try and get individual residences, households to take on the 5-gallon bucket?
You mean in terms of collecting their own food waste?
Yeah.
No, we would have no problem at all in collecting food waste. There's always people. It's amazing these days how many people want to actually do the right thing with their food waste. So collecting food waste is not an issue. It's really getting people to then want to use an end product. That's the harder piece.
Okay. And then people want their food waste collected. Have you been able to transition people from you collecting their food waste to them doing the bokashi on their own in the 5-gallon buckets at home, taking that on themselves?
Right. So we haven't. The nonprofit that I started here in town, I know you can go through them to say, hey, help me do this at home. Either regular composting, or they might even do bokashi at this point. But we're more than willing to do it, but that hasn't been our focus. Our focus was really about how do we help municipalities do this at a large scale.
Okay, so for a municipality that's currently not collecting food waste,
right?
Are you guys hiring are you doing the hauling? Are you doing the pickup? Are you hiring somebody else, or is the municipality doing that?
So there's kind of a combination. What we were doing for most of our time is we had a third party who actually it was called the New Jersey Compost Man, and you could call him and say, hey, pick up my bucket, and he would do all the pickups, and he would arrange with them how to do that. And he would you could either have him pick up once a week, twice a week, or maybe even once a month. So he would do that. So that was one option. The other option was the municipality went out. They actually had a bid process where what they wanted to do was have two separate bids. They put a bid out for a hauler and then a bid out for a processor. So we were going to be the processor, and we were going to partner with whatever hauler was the lowest bid for the municipality. Unfortunately, none of well, I shouldn't say that. I think they didn't get anywhere near the number. They were hoping to get 2 or 3 bids from the local haulers around here. They only got one, and it was a ridiculously high price. So in the end, they ended up kind of killing that process. And what they've since gone to, which we're actually starting the pilot next month, is the municipality is putting 2 large toters around town, and through a ballot or a lottery process, they're going to let 100 or 150 residents from different parts of town use those 2 toters. There'll be a lock on it. You'll get a combination. You'll put your food waste in there, and then the municipality will actually, I think probably once a week or once every 2 weeks, will actually take that those toters to a local processor. So that's three different ways you can do it.
Right. I remember you telling that you ended up inoculating the juice from the food waste instead of fermenting the food waste first, because the fermented food waste was not, there weren't as many options to take care of that. So with all of the, by figuring that out and deciding to use a screw press, having the unfermented food waste, you said you sent that to anaerobic biodigester, to farms, for feed. Where have you sent the most? I guess, who's been taking the vast majority of it? Has it been the biodigester? Has it been farms, or has it been just traditional composting?
Almost all of it has gone to composting.
Okay.
Yeah, we were my little company was on a farm, so we did spend a lot of time working in small batches with the pigs on the farm, but it was really more for testing. We never got to a point where it was like just a constant rotation to the pig farm. Almost all of it went to the compost. There's a chicken feed company that was 30 miles from us that I tried to partner with, but I think they ended up closing down. So it's been tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not all the questions I have. Anybody else?
I did want to ask, you had mentioned your current capacity was 1 or 2 tons a week. Do you feel like that is or that you're at a limit at that volume in terms of your processing rate?
Oh, no, I could have done, if I wanted to put 40 hours a week into kind of using the screw press, I could have gone more, but I didn't want to. I mean, we were, again, we're operating under an R&D permit here in New Jersey, which means we're really trying to solve some unknown problem. And the unknown problem was really, will people use bokashi, and can you scale it up? And so, using, I could have absolutely made more, or squeezed more. I just had nothing. I didn't have anywhere to put it. I wasn't selling enough. That was my limiting factor.
And I have a question of curiosity. Is there a difference between the end product when you do the fermentation on just the liquids without the solids versus doing them combined, or is it identical?
It's a hard question. They both are full of nutrients. They're both full of all the amino acids and the microbes. The problem is no 2 batches are ever exactly the same of food waste. But in terms of having all the right ingredients, yes, doing the squeezing beforehand definitely gives me a product that's got all the right stuff in it.
One more, you had mentioned that it could be used for anaerobic biodigestion.
Yes.
Do you know if the gas generating value is different between it being fermented or not fermented with the solids when they're delivered to the co-digestion?
I don't know. If I think about them trying to make methane, so it's about, carbon value and stuff like that. It's a good question. I wouldn't think it would be all that different, because most of what I'm taking out is the water and kind of some vitamins and nutrients, which I guess you could argue, depending upon, I guess they could have, yeah, no, I don't know exactly, but I would think it would be de minimis, but I don't know for certain.
I know it's a very technical question. I was just curious if you had done any tests or have provided it to any operators who had done tests or had any information about that.
I'm sorry, any tests on what?
Oh, just comparing the gas generating properties of the
No,
ferment.
we haven't. It's a great question. I mean, all we did is at some point we sent it down to, there's an AD facility about 30 minutes from us. And we've sent stuff down there at times as part of like other stuff, but we've never done a test. It's a great question.
I heard you mentioned the R&D permit. If you hadn't been able to get the R&D permit, this either wouldn't be happening, or you would have had to have gotten some sort of other food waste processing permit, I take it?
Yeah, we would have had to gone after like a full-fledged Class B or Class C permit here in New Jersey, which could take years.
Okay.
I mean, as it was, it took a year and a half, which they said, they're like, oh, to get this R&D permit, it'll take no time at all. Well, I guess no time for the government means 18 months. So. Look, I worked in the government, right? I mean, I was the environmental commissioner, and I worked with the government a lot, and I know it's tough, but wow, it was brutal working with the DEP.
So the RD permit is almost like a workaround from the Class B or Class C. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask one more? Based on your experience with the processing in this method, do you feel like it was, or I guess, how would you say it compares to the processing required for turned windrow composting? If we were to eliminate both the acquisition and the distribution of the end product and just focus on the process itself.
Oh, right. Am I still sharing my screen or no?
Negative.
Hang on, let me see if this. All right. All right. Well, so I had one more slide that I put at the end and I forgot about it. And it was kind of comparing those two. So traditional composting takes up a ton of space. And you definitely need large equipment to kind of, to turn windrows. You're taking temperatures, you're making sure that things aren't going, anaerobic on you, we're getting too hot and all. So it takes up more time, it takes up more space. I mean, composting takes 4 to 6 months if you do it in windrows. Whereas bokashi takes essentially a couple of weeks. And if you're not actually dealing with the solids yourself, that's all it takes. Because if you're going to send it to someone else, then they can deal with it. If you want to deal with the food waste yourself, what I will tell you, at least from I was talking with the folks at Epic Renewal. I mentioned them early in my conversation. They actually were very successful composting the fermented food waste, and they said it took significantly less time. It took them 1 month to get to full-fledged compost after the fermentation. And the only thing I can think of is that they took the fermented compost or the fermented food waste and added it directly to leaves and put it in a static pile, an aerated static pile. Whereas I was adding it to a drum composter that was fully in its kind of heated stages. And so only thing I can think of is that there was a lot of competition going on in mine. It had to kill everything first and then kind of regrow all the right microbes. But I was really excited to hear, and this was literally just in the last week I was talking to them, that there seems that they've been very successful at doing that. So I feel like, I might have to change my slides a little bit, because it seems like the fermented food waste might actually do, quite well from a compost perspective, especially from a time, needing less time.
We have one more question. For sourcing your EM1, do you have adequate input for the volumes of it that you need? Or adequate supplier, I should say.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of companies. Terraganics is one of them. There's a couple of companies out there that sell EM1, and the nice thing about EM1 is that you can make at least one culture yourself, sort of the same way you can do it with kind of sourdough. What I've read is that you don't want to go one generation beyond that, but you can definitely spread out the amount of time and therefore, lower your costs by kind of making your own your first culture from the EM1. But yes, the EM1 is not an issue.
Great. Thank you very much. Answering all of those questions.
Great. Yeah. And if there's any follow-ups at all, about anything, feel free to give me a call or send me an email or whatever.
Will do. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys. All right.
Thanks. Right. That wraps up our early new business that we pulled ahead of meeting minutes. So with that, we're going to go on to, I guess, what will be.
He said that he put some of this compost and stuff like the chickens and stuff.
So the food waste, so he uses a screw press and separates solids and liquids. The liquids he inoculates with EM1, turn it into bokashi tea.
Okay.
And then the solids is what he was then sending to either farms to be eaten by animals or think of an biodigester, but he was doing most of it through traditional compost.
My thought was going back to, what was it, 1958, when they said we couldn't feed garbage to animals. Is that process of taking the tea away from the solids, does that negate whatever it was that law was trying to prevent? Or
That I don't know. What my limited knowledge is that it had to be pre-consumer, not post-consumer food waste. So, food scraps that, you're cutting up a cauliflower and you've got those scraps. That is the stuff that you're able to feed to livestock, but not somebody's finished their plate and they got their leftovers. You're not allowed to feed that. But as to the specifics of that question, I do not know.
I'm assuming that the process that he's been talking about since I come in late, I'm stupid right at the moment, that it was possibly both the cut up and scrape your plate.
Once again, if he said he was composting most of it, but if you are going to send it to animals to feed on, it's probably not post-consumer.
You say his client base, he had 100 households,
It's like two
restaurants.
restaurants, and then
There was one other category.
Didn't get to note it down. It went very quickly and I was watching the
it
report.
might have been a business that wasn't.
But he has material sources that potentially bring him pre-consumer scraps. But in what quantities, I have no idea.
Good. All right, so.
So I just want to say thank you for the guest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Ways to combat food waste, so.
Yeah.
It's been a week of learning.
What's that?
It's been a week of learning.
We're gonna jump back to the approval of meeting minutes. We have, they were distributed in the packet with the agenda. We have first the meeting minutes from July 20th. Are there any corrections?
I have the not edited, I just want to go over detail.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know.
Okay.
Sorry, I think there are.
Well, looks like there are no other corrections. So at least the July 20th meeting minutes are approved. And then we also have minutes from August 23. Any corrections? All right,
They look fairly accurate, I mean, if there's anything, it might be a capitalization here, minor, very minor things, I don't think there's any concept that really needs to be changed.
all right. Well, if there are no corrections, then those minutes are approved as well. That will conclude our first order of business. We're going to kind of jump back onto our third order of business, which is reports, starting with the districts.
Yeah, let's see, start with that, I guess, I don't know what exactly they call it. I mean, I presented the budget to the county council for the first time last Thursday. I think it's just a work session. I don't know that that's officially a public hearing or anything. But it's a chance for council members to review, ask questions, raise any concerns, issues, and then they vote to either accept or reject the budget as submitted. So I thought it went really well. They unanimously voted to accept the budget as submitted. There was not a whole lot of, I guess, questions about, what was in the budget, what we were proposing to do with the budget. So I thought that went very well. I don't anticipate many problems through the rest of the process, which October the 3rd is the first reading public hearing of the budget, and then the second reading and adoption is scheduled for the 17th, I believe. So, but that's moving right along, and I think we're going to be fine on that front. Related to the food waste, have been updating you all. I've been working with Sean Mia and the City of Bloomington's Economic Sustainable Development Department. We've had lots of discussions about what to do with earth keepers being out of the picture. There is from both the city and the district board side, there does appear to be some interest, willingness to consider potentially subsidizing food waste collections for a period of time, not indefinitely, but for a period of time, until a local composting option became available, because that really seems to be the big obstacle to getting somebody down here, is there's no local facility to take it to. So we do currently have a request for quote issued to I think we have 5 companies we identified. 4 are in the Indianapolis area. 1 is down in Borden. So we'll see what kind of responses we get from that, and what kind of dollar figures they put to cost they put to get them up here to be able to do the residential collection of food waste, and if it's something that the city and the district think that they can manage to fund, for a few years. Again, we have the anaerobic digester is still kind of dangling out there. The city's not made any firm commitment, but if they do move forward with that, that would be a potential local option to take the material to. There's, depending on what happens with that, there's options to look at the land that's available that the city, the county, or the district owns that might be suitable to do composting at. And then the question of, aside from permitting issues and all that with the state, is, the question of, how such a facility would be operated. Would it be done publicly, a public-private partnership, solely privately? Those are things that would have to be figured out. But in here we are, continuing to look at it, continuing to try to move forward and, fill the gap created by earth keepers leaving, and hopefully can get something, have a clearer picture of what our options are after the quotes come in. The quotes are due by Friday, October the 6th. We'll see what we get and where that goes. A bit of exciting news for our South Walnut facility. After 3.5 years or so, we finally have a new forklift.
Yay! Government worth it.
That was not us. We actually it was we had in our 2019 budget an appropriation to purchase a new forklift. Of course, that budget was all done and set up in the summer of 18, and then COVID hit. We had it, we'd identified and had ordered a Toyota brand forklift, but it had to be built. And then once COVID hit, they couldn't get parts because you couldn't import things. And then once all that settled down, and then I don't know how this worked in, because what changed in their manufacturing process, but then the machines they were building weren't meeting EPA emission specs. So we started looking at other dealers and vendors, and we did finally Crown lift trucks is who found one for us. It's not new, it's used, 2018 model, but it was also about $10,000 less than what we had budgeted 3 years ago for a new machine. But the one that we're replacing is a 1994 model, I believe, that the district purchased new when the South Walnut facility was opened up, and it's done its work for us, and it's time to let it get some rest. So,
Are you gonna keep it for extra use, or?
no, we'll surplus it and sell it. Try to sell it. It's not something that runs 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. So, you know, if we have, as we've done for the past 20 years, if it goes down and we have to go without it for a day or two, we can work around that. You know, we do, worst case scenario is we have a skid steer loader that has a fork attachment, and that can serve the same purpose if it has to, for the most part. So,
Not as smoothly, but it can do it.
it can do it. Depending on who's operating it, but it can do it. And then we have, we don't have the biggest facility. Storing an extra piece of equipment like that just takes up space we can't give up. And other than that, I don't know that we have a rebranding update on the agenda, and I'm sure we'll talk about the tour at some point. So for Tuesday, so I don't know that I have much else to provide right now.
Cool, thank you, Tom. Any other questions on the report? All right,
Actually, I do have one. What's the likelihood, my ears perked up when you said the city, county finding some land to do the composting. But it seems like the permits are the thing that would be the most challenging to actually happen.
Yeah.
Cause that's where I would want to do it, have the city take that on.
Well, I mean, the other part of particularly when you're dealing with a facility that's going to take food waste, which would obviously be a caveat regardless of who's operating it. We're going to do it. It's going to take, full slate of organics. And, so those permits like also get more pricey.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head, Earth Keepers would
I know they got item grants.
Yeah, I mean, but and again, there's lots of scenarios and how it can work out with regard to public-private or solely private operation, and part of the issue is we'd have to look at for example, if we use district-owned land, but basically lease that land to you to operate a facility, well, who has to hold the permit legally?
Right.
We may not be, the state may not allow us to pursue that permit because we're not the ones running the facility. But I know that, when the landfill was operating, before the district was formed, the county owned the landfill. The county held the permit, Rumpke operated the landfill. But again, that was a slightly different. Again, it depends on how you set it all up, but the county paid Rumpke to operate it. The county collected the tipping fees. And so if we had to do a facility and it's on district land, you're operating and running it, you set the tipping fees, you keep the funds, you pay us $10,000 a year to lease the land. Right. That's a little different setup. I don't catch it up. So there are still some questions about how that permitting would work. Right.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. That's not simple.
Never. Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Tom. I do not have anything to report as the chair. I just want to say thank you again to Bill and to Rumpke for this week. I think everyone really enjoyed it. Talked a lot about it. Yeah, it was very valuable and a very, informative week in a lot of ways. It's good to see and to be a part of.
Yeah, I just, that was.
So if somebody had asked the question of what percentage of waste goes into our main landfill is from outside companies, it was 40%. I got the answer to it.
Wow.
That's a good amount.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that the MRF is an impressive facility. And, I've certainly not seen every MRF that's out there, but it's the biggest one that I've been to. I guess most technologically advanced one that I've been to with regard to the machines and sorting equipment that's in there. So it was impressive, very interesting to see. So.
I think they do a good job on the tour showing how it all comes in mixed.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you see the bins at the end where the final product is all separated. And I've been here 20 years and that's the first time I've seen robotics. That's a new addition. So those were pretty neat for me to see.
When I was running for county commissioner in 2016, one of the questions we were heavily debating to or not to have a MRF. And I remember an interview at the radio station, they asked my thoughts. And I said, I think having a MRF is a great idea. I would really like to see it go. However, I don't think as a county operation that we have the funding and maybe even the technology to do it the proper way, even though I would really like to see one. However, that being said, I think if we could find a private entity to do one, private industry usually always does things better, more economical than what we can do as a county organization. And our MRF never did go through. And it seemed that I had the same thought process of what the current county organization hierarchy had as well. I was really impressed with this MRF. And I think this particular MRF that y'all have proved my thought process of how the private industry would be able to do it better and more efficiently and probably a whole lot less cost-wise. And so I would encourage people in Monroe County to go ahead and if they're not going to bring their recyclables to one of the people that does recycling for a living or to the county, if they're going to put it out to the curb, that it get put out so that Rumpke can get it into their MRF. It was a fantastic facility.
That's it for my chair report, if you call it that. So,
I just want to know when the Columbus facility is going to be finished. That's probably 2028, but man, I want to see that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you wanting to do something of similar nature here in Bloomington when you were talking to Mr. Rumpke himself about it?
So I don't know that there's a scalability here. The population is not big enough.
Right.
To support something nearly that big.
Right.
I think the district's drop sites are phenomenal. The way you have the source separation and everything, that is 90% of what the MRF does. The
Right.
separating material. The district already does that. If the district could come up with some kind of a baling operation where they can bale their own aluminum, bale their own cardboard, bale their own office paper. I mean, that possibly an option. The source separation is really big. That your group does a really good job with that. I before we opened our room, I used the facilities constantly because, like I said, I'm from an area where recycling is ingrained. People would have a tiny dumpster for their garbage and a huge dumpster for their recycling. So my wife and I still separate everything, and we would always use the district facilities. Really, really nice setup that district had. I just don't know that there's enough material. I think first you have to get the mindset changed in the community
Yeah.
to make recycling a priority before you build the facility. The facility won't do you any good if you're not pumping material into it. It would just be a waste without the material. So I think the main thing is to get the community behind recycling more, make it more a part of the culture, and then the facilities will be able to support themselves. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, it's.
All right. So we have no special orders for today's meeting. We are going to go right to reports and special committees, which is another rebranding subcommittee update. Essentially, the process is still progressing. We're through, yes, I would call the last stage of the broader set of logo variations. So next step that we're thinking about is sort of the timing and the announcement of the full rebranding process, which I think Tom mentioned at our last meeting is targeting for the start of next year.
So it's all gonna be done next week and we're gonna have new business cards, everything on it for the next meeting, right?
Almost. Soon enough.
You know, as soon as I do that, then somebody will throw a curveball and redo the logo entirely.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it's going well. I think it's on track now, not quite where we wanted it when it started, but now that it's going pretty regularly.
And I will say that this, the logo finalization process is taking longer than I'd hoped and anticipated, but we're getting there and we're very close. And at least, you know, through the time, at least we've got something that there's consensus, you know, will work. May not be everybody's first choice, but at least it is something that everybody that's looked at it and been involved has agreed that it's better than where we are now and something that'll work moving forward.
Very happy with it. Any other questions? Okay. That's it for special committees. That brings us to our last item of business, which is, excuse me, the AISWMD 2023 conference, which is in about a week and a half from now. I think it's October 2nd and 3rd. And I know I am signed up to go, Matt's signed up to go. I think that Tom will be there. I think that's it for us. But Ash, did you have any particular to cover for that?
I did.
Just a reminder.
Okay. It's from the reservations here.
And I would just say that, you know, registration is still open. It's, you know, the price has gone up a little bit. We've passed that early bird deadline. But the one thing hotel rooms, I'm not sure if there's any, hotel room availability, if anybody was interested in both days, staying night on the Monday. But conference registration is certainly still open for anything from just the Recycle Force tour on Monday afternoon to, 2 full days. If anybody is still interested in that, schedules change, minds have changed and whatever, so.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay. That is our last item of business. We are near our scheduled, or I guess a little past our scheduled end time. Was there any other items of new business that anyone else wanted to introduce that was included in the agenda? Okay, so I don't see any members of the public present on Zoom or in the room. So we won't have any public comment.
There is one Zoom user out there that I'm Major Huber, I'm not familiar with, but welcome to raise your hand if you have any comments or questions.
Yeah, in that case, I will say that each member of the public has 4 minutes to speak. If you're interested in doing so, just use the raise hand function in Zoom. You can type into the chat. But if there aren't any takers on Zoom, then I will just note that our next regular meeting will be the 3rd Thursday of October, which will be the 19th at 5:30 p.m. in the Showers Building North, room 100B, where we are now. And if there is no objection, this meeting will adjourn. All right, seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.